Hello, and welcome to Caplin Connects, the podcast where we talk about single dealer platforms, trading technology, and everything in between. I'm John Ashworth. In each episode, we'll dive into the trends, tools, and talent shaping the future of electronic trading. Join me as we unpack what's new and what's next. I'm delighted to welcome Stéphane Malrait, currently chairman of the executive board of the ACI, a veteran of the industry, but with notable and significant waypoints at JP Morgan, SocGen, and ING.
Thank you for the invitation.
Very good to see you. You've also done a number of non-exec and advisory roles, but I thought we'd start off by discussing how your journey started and how you got into the banking sector.
Yes, it was not planned to be like that, to be honest. And I think it's a lesson learned for me in life is you have to take the opportunity when you find them, or you create your own paths as you go along. I did a computer engineering degree in France. And after, when I was finishing the first year, you had to do an internship. And I did my internship for a commodities trading house. So that's where I started. And I did it in New York. And it was to trade soft commodity, coffee, sugar, cocoa, those kind of things. And I really liked it. But a few years later, JP Morgan was looking for starting the swaps business. And in commodities, you have a lot of swaps happening. So in commodity trading, you exchange oil against sugar, for example. So they looked at me and started to hire me to develop a swap pricing solution for them. And that's soon after I moved to London from the US. And I really enjoyed it. It was a really cool experience for me to start that. I started to work in London for JP Morgan, and then they sent me to Paris for 6 months. So I was an expat in my own country, which is quite interesting. But the funny story at JP Morgan was in the 2000s was really the beginning of the electronification of markets. And JP Morgan, it was the first internet boom. And JP Morgan wanted to take a bet on the electronification of markets. So they were putting huge amount of money to develop their first single dealer platform. And it was a pure in-house build because there was not Caplin, I think was in the beginning to exist, but at the time there was not something there. And in fact, it was not one team. They put two teams in competition to develop that single dealer platform. And so that's why I started in the industry, and I stayed 10 years there. I worked a bit in New York, a bit in London, starting in technology. And at the end of my 10 years at JP Morgan, I moved to the front office side where I was putting in the requirements for the FX electronification business there. And JP Morgan at that time was not very big in FX, so probably in the top 10, 15, but not as it now. So they really wanted to try to catch up from other banks how to develop their infrastructure and technology there. Big name at the time were Citi, Deutsche Bank, and Barclays. So it's interesting to see a change over time. And after 10 years there, I was back to working in New York at the time, and I wanted to come back to Europe. And this is where Société Générale came and said, well, a French bank wanted to have a very big European presence, and they wanted to develop their own single dealer platform. Mm-hmm. So this was my card to sell my story to them. So they hired me and they asked me, do you want to work in Paris or do you want to work in London? I thought at the time London was probably from a business point of view a better fit for me. The network on the FX market was much larger in London than in Paris. So I decided to move to London, and we had a huge project to develop our single dealer platform there. And the difference were at JP Morgan, it was a pure in-house development by two separate teams in parallel. For Société Générale, the development force was not big enough, so we had to partner with a tech company to do the development for Société Générale. So second model is versus build versus buy is you do the hybrid and you ask somebody to develop it for you. You own the IP, but it's quite expensive. But we managed to get it through, and I was a superior. I stayed 8 years there, and then after 8 years, I got another call from ING Bank who are trying to do similar thing for the Dutch bank. Slightly different client base, very more corporate focus at ING, and something a lot to be built on the electronification of FX. So we had to build a single dealer platform again, and this time this is where we decided to buy versus build. So during my career I had the three experience, like pure development, hybrid, and buying the solution.
Very interesting. Going back to the beginning, the early 2000s you called it, you mentioned the name of the very big banks that were significant at that time. But you also mentioned it was the time of the internet boom, which I remember because I was involved with Phoenix at the time.
Yeah.
And we saw the e-commerce revolution emerging from the FX divisions of banks more than anywhere. But looking back, why was that? What was the problem that you were trying to solve? Was it something that the customers had asked for, or was it something you just thought that?
So yeah, you're probably correct that most of the banks at the time knew they had to do something because of the internet revolution happening. And in fact, at JP Morgan, it didn't start in FX. The first product was on future and option and fixed income and FX. So that was a strategy, developed like 3 different asset classes. And I think FX took off as an industry, mainly by client demands more than through my career. There was a natural resistance to change or to electronify the market, right? So we were viewed 25 years ago as we need to have you because something is happening on the internet, but we don't want you to be too successful. So there was a resistance to change for years, except in FX, because there was a multi-dealer initiative starting very quickly as the Patriarchs, FXall of the world were starting as consortiums. But there was also a single platform, heavy investment from, I said, the Barclays, the Dutch Bank, Citi. So they had to react. But the success was not because banks were investing. I think the success in FX was because clients were demanding to trade electronically, which was legs compared to fixed income, for example. There was no take-up in single dealer platform in fixed income because there was no client demand.
Interesting. What technologies were you looking at in the days of JP Morgan?
Oh, I don't remember. So we used to work with TIPCO at the time. I don't know if TIPCO still exists, owned by Rarity, for a messaging layer. And then we tried different proprietary methods. So I don't remember too much at JP Morgan. I remember that SocGen, it was when we started to have the big debate, because JP was pre-HTML5, so it was much more complex to develop the platform. But when we started to look at it at SocGen, this is where we had to make technology choice. And it was challenging because it was still the beginning of streaming technology on the web. And if you made the wrong choice, you may end up in a dead zone. And HTML5 was still very, very early stage. So still a lot of bugs and stuff like that. So that's a challenge when you start to build something new from scratch and you want to develop yourself, is you want to build it for the future, right? So you have to last at least 10 years, where in technology, the technology change probably more than once on a 10-year horizon. So you take a big bet, and if you take the wrong bet, it can be very costly. At JP Morgan, it was less of an issue because at the time we put tons of money on the table. And I said in the beginning, we had 2 different teams using 2 different technology to try to develop the solution.
Were they set up deliberately in competition?
Yes. Since the beginning, I think it's interesting because I don't think anyone will do it in our days because the cost is way too high. But it was 2 teams of 80 people each.
80?
Yes.
Wow.
And the first one to go to market will keep their job. The other one will be terminated.
And what happened to the ones who didn't make it?
So it was employee, but it was also a lot of external consultancy company. So the consultancy lost the contract and one got the contract, and then the employee on one side moved to the other side. So I don't think we lost any employee per se, but it was a big challenge.
But I would imagine they all found jobs immediately because it was a growing market.
Yes.
Lots of banks who have no skills at all.
Exactly. It was really the rush to, nobody had a single dealer platform. Nobody had electronic pricing capabilities on their desktop. So every single bank was trying to build something up or to buy something that we want to use different components on.
So what were the business goals when you got to SocGen, and who were you competing with, and who were the role models that you looked up to or across to at that time?
So yeah, at the time, SocGen was quite interesting because I moved from a kind of global bank to a more regional focused bank. So the client base was different, the competition was different. The first thing I realized when you move to European banks is that the competition they look at is a peer in the country, not the peer in the region, right? So SocGen was looking at BNP, at CACIB, at Natixis, say, what do they do? Or like, how can we better than them? But not at Barclays or not at UniCredit, which was for me quite interesting because I saw Europe as one, coming back from the US, I saw Europe one big region, but competition was first trying to understand what your peer bank in your country are doing. But then the competition at the time was more like missing out from the market electronification, right? So JP Morgan was one of the first one with other big names to implement, where the more regional bank didn't do anything for the first 10 years. But at the time, SocGen said, if we don't do anything, then it will really be hard to treat. And it was not only single dealer platform, it was the same on multi-dealer platform. I remember when I started, we were pretty low in the ranking on some of the big multi-dealer platform compared to the size of the business.
Because you couldn't price quickly enough?
And we could not price quickly enough. There was a lot of manual process, not enough automation. So that was a big challenge. So we had a challenge on single dealer platform, but we also had a challenge on multi-dealer platform. If you price a hedge fund and you win that transaction, you knew that you were going to lose money. It's because you win it not because you are the best price. It's probably you are outdated price compared to where the market has already moved or is going to move. So we learned quite quickly, like this model could not continue to evolve that way, that we had to have quite a big investment into the whole technology. And I think it's good because you cannot take only the client-facing application, single dealer or multi-dealer platform into account. You have to take the whole stack from pricing, hedging, and distribution together. And that was part of my role, is to make sure how do we look at the whole stack, and distribution is the only piece of the puzzle.
So we're interesting times now, because we've got a multi-dealer platform market emerging. You've got a commitment to build a single dealer platform to automate some of the manual processes. But I presume there were customers who wanted to see you over the phone, and maybe even a salesman go visit them from time to time. So how did you manage those channels and that channel contention?
That's why I think, what's strange to me, there was still resistance to change at that time, but there was even more client demand, right? So we're starting to see that we are losing client business because we were not high enough on multi-dealer platform, or we didn't have a single dealer platform we were capable of to reply to the demand of the customer from a front office point of view, but also from a back office point of view, the allocation of message, payment instruction, all that stuff. So I think this is where things starting to move around. I think the key to success in those environments, and I think it may be true today as well, is you need to have a strong sponsor of that initiative and budget. And strong, it has to be quite high within the organization, because no matter how you plan for it, it is an investment to be made for the bank. And the return are not going to be in 6 months, not even to be in year one. So it's going to be a multi-year investment, and a multi-year to be able to generate the return that you want. And the trader in general, they look on a day-to-day P&L. So after 6 months, they don't even know if they will still work in the same company. So you have to go high enough in the organization to find the hook of the people who are going to be sponsored and help you to push those issues through. So that was one thing to make it work. The second lesson I learned is more in terms of prioritization. All right, which one you have to do first? And you can do the quick win first, try to attract, but you also need to invest into the future. Right? So you cannot only focus on the quick win. You have to focus on the short, medium, or long-term gain. So what's the basic core component you need to change? What's the future direction you want to prepare? And what are the quick wins to show progress? The quick win is the only way to continue to get your sponsor happy and to show progress, but you have to continue. So prioritization is really key. And then the third thing, if I have to use another one, is more, now that you have those two in place, try to find within the organization people who are the believer, or people who can shine from the result that you bring to. So if you have a few salespeople who enjoy working with you, to give you clear requirements, to show the solution to their clients, to work with traders to improve the current solution, those people are really key, because they are going to be the glue within the organization to be able to then, although we look at them and say, well, I was thinking this guy was not going anywhere, and suddenly his P&L is going up, and suddenly his clients are calling him. And so that's how you start to change the culture of the organization. But you have to realize that resistance to change is always there. Finding those people who will help you change that culture and to start to show progress and to gain more and more traction within the organization.
You made a brilliant point there. It's always struck me odd that it takes, 12 to 15 years to commission and build and launch a nuclear submarine or an aircraft carrier, but the average duration of a government is 4 or 5 years. And what you just made me realise, there's a perfect analogy in banking, that the cycle time to deliver a new technology initiative might way exceed the career ambitions of the person in charge at the time. But you're also telling me that the enthusiasm, the on-the-ground sponsorship of a bright salesperson who absolutely gets it, is delivering on behalf of their customers, can shine and drive the thing from ground level as well.
Yes, it's both, right? So for the senior manager, you will probably not see the results, but it's still, and I realized this after for your senior sponsor, he's selfish in some way to some extent. He knows that by investing in this technology, he will not get the P&L during his time at this position, but he will still help him to demonstrate to the board that he's not scared of making investment.
Yes.
Right, that he have a vision, and I think those people who have clear vision or are not scared to have the guts to push something new, I think the senior management see it as a positive, even if it didn't realize into P&L.
In fact, even worse, it might have been a negative impact on a P&L because they spent the money but didn't get the result.
Exactly. But so their career is not negatively impact from it. Sometimes it's a positive impact because they see, oh wow, this guy is ready to invest. He wants to implement change. And that's what the board is looking in a lot of banks. They say, who is going to be in charge of preparing us for the futures? For the sales and trading staff, it's more short-term driven. But that's why it's more linked to people who believe in it, right? It's the early adopter who believe in it, and then they will get the value from it because since they collaborate more with you, you are going to give them more focus, yes. And you are going, so if you have a salesperson who represents the corporate sector who is really happy to work with you, but the other sales team who represents, I don't know, the financial institution sector doesn't want to collaborate with you, naturally you will help the guy who is easier to work with, right? And he will get more benefits because he will get more technology resources. So they see the gain for them as well. It's like free resources to work for them. So it's a win-win on both sides.
So those dynamics within a bank are interesting. They are inevitably political. The other political dynamic in a bank is just the organizational structure around asset classes. So how did you, you've told us you've had a career that's gone, well, started in commodities, spent time in fixed income, then the majority, I would say, in FX. But how did these initiatives get impacted by the political structure across asset classes?
It's interesting because at JP Morgan, that was how the team was dismantled at the end. It's because it was a cross-asset team and the manager, like some of the head of FX, didn't want to pay for the development of future and option, for example. Yes. So the budget issue was very hard to fix. And it's still the case that in most of the banks today, the allocation of resources, revenue, P&L, investment is asset class by asset class. So we try through my career, like during 30 years, say it's difficult because if you want to digitalize a business, there is so much you can learn from one business to the other, right? What we do in FX can be replicated in fixed income, or what happened in commodities could learn from others as well. And so few people have that knowledge because it's very, and that was probably the value I brought to some of the organization I work for. Is for me, I was interested into that transition between fixed income, FX, commodities, and I was never an equity guy because equity is mainly exchange traded. But on the OTC front, I was really involved in so that. So the key to success for me was more stakeholder management. And it's true today, if you talk to people in the fixed income world, like tomorrow I go to a fixed income conference, everybody will think I'm a fixed income guy. When I go to the FX conference at ACI, everybody think I'm an FX guy. So I can mold to the different networks that I have, and they shouldn't think I'm still an expert into that. To that place.
You're one of the few people out there that can pull this off. But
it's hard, yeah. There's not that many examples because normally you are paid for a job with specific to a task, with specific to one asset class. So naturally you don't have that expertise. It's rare to find. It's less of the case on the buy side. So I notice on the asset management community, for example, now they have cross-asset trading desk, or execution desk. So then the technology development is more cross-asset focused.
Why is that?
I think because they are smaller team and smaller budgets. So they cannot spend as much money and they are not pricing the instruments or just buying and selling and managing the risk. It's simpler, but in terms of complexity of the technology, it's probably a bit simpler. Where in banks, an FX trader will be an FX trader all his life. Rates trader will be a rates trader all of his life. And they don't move from one bucket to the other. So I think it's a shame, to be honest, because I think the banks could benefit a lot from a cross-asset vision and they could save a lot of money, but they got burned so many times. And you see it like the front office is cross-asset vision, where the back office normally is more horizontal lines. And there is no right or wrong solution. It's more how do you find the best way to have a cross-asset vision with still the expertise for each, be the best at what you are.
Well, the very biggest clients will always want to have the very best experts from the bank. So they might not want generalists, but I can see that different segments, retail, wealth management, the banks can only deal with generalists.
Yeah, so it may come, but I think right now it's like, you want to hire the best in one domain, so you look for that expertise and you just hire. But then it impacts the whole structure of the organization because the P&L is just for this domain.
Yes, interesting. So let's go back to your time, recent past at ING. They've got technology, they've bought it really. You had the hybrid role at SocGen, you then acquired technology at ING. But all the other banks are acquiring technology. They've all got single dealer platforms that look similar. Why are the customers staying with ING? What's the glue that keeps them there and not going to SocGen?
Yes, I think it can be true for a lot of banks, but ING was quite pleased with discovering that the clients are very loyal to the bank. And I tried to understand why in the first few years I was there. So if you look at this type of bank, it's a big retail banks with institutional bank or corporate banking type of activity. So large corporate client, and a lot of the activity for this part of the bank is lending money to large corporates. So you have very strong relationship with our corporate clients because you are giving them money in return of a fee. But they come with an idea, they want to build a new factory, they want to build a bridge or whatever. You give them money. So we create very, very strong relationship with those corporate clients. Then the market activity is kind of an add-on to that to say, okay, now that we give you money in euro, but you have part of that investment, you have to build a factory in different parts of the world. You need to have a currency exchange program. And why don't you stay with us? Because we have good relationship to the FX component of that. And so it's a long-standing relationships that they have, and the clients are happy with that relationship. So they're happy to bring business to the market activity, to FX rates and commodities and others. So it's still based on price. So I think the difference compared to 20 years ago, where this is your mate, you work together for 15 years, you know their wife and kids, and you go to restaurants, and so you have a good business relationship, but you have also a very strong personal relationship. Now it's not enough because the pricing is also an important component of it, right? You can be friends, but it's still business to run, so you have to be at least at par with the competition. And so that's why I think banks like ING had to compete compared to the JP Morgan of the world. So they don't compete with them in terms of number of clients that they have globally or the footprint globally, but they have to be able to price at least as good as their clients to be able to price. And we were very transparent. I think it was in the press, so it's nothing secret, but if we were losing money or making money we had a transparent discussion with those clients. See, on those transactions, it's very hard for us to make revenues, and we could describe it to the clients. Versus that. So everybody has a role to play into the transaction life cycle, and the clients really understand, okay, I'm ready to partner with the bank, but the bank have to have their own benefits to be able to give me that business. So we are very open to those type of discussions with the client. And in return, they were kind of, wow, you're so open, and you tell us how your business work, that we are ready to give you money. So in a way, it's good because it's still, even in an electronic world, it's very still relationship-based. People, when they need you, at least with corporate clients, that was the thing. It's not just, I saw that you are mispricing, so I'm going to grab this price and try to. It was not that type of relationship at all.
In all your time working with single dealer platforms, how have the expectations of the customers changed? Everybody's got apps and smartphones and have become experts in design and GUIs and things. But do you see that in the conversations with the clients?
Yes, so we have, and it was the same internally. So you have different type of clients. So first, I think what's true for all clients is they just want something simple, works. I have a login, easy way to log in, easy way to onboard, easy way to find the transaction I want to find, trades. So making life for the client easy is kind of the first mantra across all different client base. Then you have different type of clients. You have some, and FX is true compared to other asset classes, more some people are using FX just for payment of their monthly cash flow forecasting. So for them, it just kind of a commodity. They have to log into the website, click, do their payment, make sure it's done on time, that there's no issues. So simplification of that process is key. For others, they are more demanding. It's more a trading function. They want to see the flash pricing, so they want more complex type of instrument. So this you have to go a step further to be able to, but you have to be careful with the balance or to switch, because you can lose a simple type of payment function if you design something too complex for the more demanding clients. And I remember like probably 10 years ago, a lot of banks are two different FX single dealer platforms. They had kind of the payment FX single dealer platform and the more active trading single dealer platform. At ING, we took the decision to merge them both to one and make it as simple as possible, and then give functionality based on the client demands. So you can switch on and off some of that part of functionality in the system. It make it much cheaper to run, and it still reply to very demanding client versus simple workflow.
So moving away from one size fits all of the mid-2000s.
Yes, exactly.
I can't have a conversation with anyone on this topic without talking about AI. I get asked it myself. What did you see towards the end of your time at ING, the role that AI was playing in terms of development or...
Yes, so I was very curious in the last 6 months to 9 months about AI, because to some extent, AI is not new, right? So there's a lot of things that when you do in algorithmic trading capabilities and stuff, you use a lot of the AI techniques for the last 10 years. So these continue to grow, and I think it's used by bank more in the algo space. But what was new was generative AI. It took people by surprise. And I got curious about it because why I saw that it was used heavily in other industry. In the finance world, institutional finance, the adoption was very slow. And I tried to understand why. So when I was at the end at ING, I tried to go through seminar, webinar, conferences, because it was part of my job as a head of innovation for market. Try to understand what can be done and why it's not being done. So part of it was regulatory driven, or the fear of lack of regulation into that stuff. So making sure, like, if you give an advice to a client from an AI bot, the client will not sue you. So a lot of banks, like 2-3 years ago, they decided, well, nobody can use ChatGPT within the banks, they will log them in. So you had this approach, and then you cannot innovate, you cannot do anything there. You have some other who say, okay, we are going to investigate and do things, but, very like e-commerce 25 years ago. It's a team in the corner, in the back. If they find something, great. If they don't find something, great as well, because we don't like change. So some banks start to invest, but it was very hidden. So I want to breakfast meetings that we could not talk to each other because we could not say which one we were trying to pilot or not. And then there was a third category of people who were starting to be active about it. And the big success that they had, that may please you, was working with fintech companies. Because fintech companies had the flexibility to work with generative AI that banks, because of the controls that are in place, could not move. And that's what we did at ING. At the end, we work with some fintech companies to say, what can you do with AI that we could do? And something is public knowledge, but we did something on chat system where it was on the fixed income side, not in FX, where with a small fintech company, where we were chatting with our clients, and the salesperson could highlight part of the chat and try to say, like, this person wants to buy a financial instrument from us, and they were doing a copy-paste. So we were translating the discussion to a format that our API could ingest, our pricing engine could reply with a price, and then to be able to book a fixed income transaction, it was an average of 2-3 minutes before. And with AI, generative AI, we could do it under 10 seconds. Right? So it was a huge gain to use generative intelligence in that space. It didn't break any regulation because the salesperson was always in the loop. So we found a way to do it. But the genius to be able to go live in production with that is partnering with a fintech company who had the time to implement and test and do all the R&D on this. I still think we are very, very early stage in financial markets on this front. Some people are still resisting that change, probably a bit less than 2 years ago. But compared to something like digital asset or tokenization of existing asset or central bank digital currency exchange, something like that, I think AI usage in financial services or financial market will take over very quickly. Right? I think within the 2-3 years, People will use Copilot. Like 2 years ago, there was nobody using Microsoft Copilot. Now you see probably half of the people you meet are using it, and probably those type of tools will become so normal that, and we see that as well with when we recruit new people, like younger generations that they come. That's the first question: that what AI tool do you use? Oh, we don't have any. Or like, how do you want me to work? It's going to be a game changer for the next 2 years to 3 years.
I think you're right. I think we've reached a tipping point where it's now okay to admit that you use generative AI within your job. You don't need to be embarrassed about it. You don't need to be shy. You don't need to think that you're copycatting stuff. A fool with a tool is still a fool, but if you have the context, then that's very relevant.
If you use it as an improvement mechanism and you're still in control, I think it's you want to review the emails that you write, you want to translate a document, all that stuff.
Yeah. If I may say so, people of your and my generation, we place a high premium on human interactions. But I'm also hearing from you that that's your experience of the clients in the banks as well. Just because an AI bot could sit on the end of a fixed income quote in 2 or 3 years' time, I'm still hearing from you that clients, as you put it, who want to build bridges or factories, want to speak to a person.
Yes.
Is that just us being old-fashioned, or is that really a thing?
No, I think, and it's crazy because I spent like most of my career to try to automate processes. So I was hated by the voice team as a guy who just want to take rid of their job. And towards the last 2 years of my banking career, I realized as well that automating the voice workflow has benefits. So that example of a chat systems where you can still bring automation into chat, is still give value into keeping that relationship going. So I think that the best of both worlds is probably to be able to continue to have that client relationship strong, but to give easy way for your client to do transactions. All right. So go back to the beginning of this podcast when we started to speak about the internet boom. The travel industry was really like destroys, like the people who organize trips and to travel agents using travel agents was the norm 30 years ago, and then it completely disappears. But now you still see reappearing where if you want to do a trip in Africa, you probably still go to a travel agent to help you organize it. But if you want to fly to New York, you don't. And I think that the analogy here is, for certain very simple workflow, you have fully automated solution that really removes the noise, etc. If you have very large, complex transactions, you really want to make sure you are still in a relationship with the best guy who can help you on this and everything in between. So the relationship is still very key for a lot, because financial market, it's theory, it's very large amounts of money that we move around in FX. So you want to know who is on the other side. You want to know that the transaction is going to be safe and secure and the money is going to arrive in the destination I want it to be. So it was late for me to realize that, but the two are incredibly important.
Very interesting. Changing the subject, or at least going back a little bit to the contrast between multi-dealer platforms and single-dealer platforms. The evidence in the last BIS triennial survey and the one before that suggested that there was a small but noticeable shift back from multi-dealer platforms to all single-dealer platforms. So the data is there to support that. Why do you think that might be, and what do you think will happen in the 2025 triennial survey when it comes out at the end of the year?
So interesting story to start on this one. Like when I started at Société Générale in 2008 and we launched a project for single dealer platform in 2009, I found my senior sponsor, but there was one guy, I will not tell the name, who was really against it. And he was very close to the head of markets, and he was keep telling me single dealer platform are dead. They've been now everybody is going to trade on multi-dealer platform. We're wasting our time of money to invest in sales. And I had a different view on it, so I argued quite hard with this guy. And he was not my friend, and I was not his friend either. But the history has proven, and it's a cross asset. I was discussing that this morning with other people, because you see that not only in FX, but you see it in fixed income, even in equities. Equities is like cash. It's mainly electronic. And now they see more people taking direct liquidity on the equity market as well. So it's something which not only in FX. And I think the reason is based on that. So there's probably more than one reason. One reason is the cost of multi-dealer platform are quite high for regional banks and to be able to process. So the strategy 10 years ago, it was we are going to be where the clients want us to be. So if they trade on one platform, we have to be present there. So you have cost of connectivity to a lot of multi-dealer platforms. You have a cost of running those connectivity, and then the brokerage fees that they ask to be paid. So adding all that up is quite high for regional banks. So I think then now it's changed to the point where we cannot supply liquidity to 25 different trading venues. So we have to restrict to probably the top 5, 10 max. And then the rest we have to divert it. Probably now has the technology to show a price difference as well. Right? So the client will see the benefits because it will be cheaper. And going back to my analogy of the airline industry, something you want to fly from London to New York, you can go on Expedia, but if you go to British Airways and you find a cheaper price and you have and not a lot are doing that, but some companies do, you will probably go direct to the cheapest, and you have a better user experience as well, right? So if you go to an unknown travel agent because you are going to fly, say, £5 on the £1,000 transaction, is it really a good saving to run? So I think here in FX is very similar, is you trust your counterparty, you have more functionality on the single dealer platform, you potentially have a better price. So it's a lot of benefits for that. And for the bank, the benefit is much cheaper as well compared to the fee on the way. I don't think it's death of the multi-dealer platform per se, because there's a lot of benefits as well on multi-dealer platform, but at least we saw that it's not the death of the single dealer platform, it's more tailored for other usage, and people see a lot of value in it, so it's still going to be that. I think it's API, single dealer platform, and multi-dealer platform are the three, plus what I said before, the chat continue to be the voice activity to some extent, automation inside systems. So you have those 4 channels who coexist now and will continue to coexist. Another reason probably we didn't discuss on more volume in single dealer platform is compared to 10 years ago. If you look to tier 3, tier 4 banks, they didn't electronify their business 10 years ago, but now they do, right? So I was discussing to banks in Latin America a week ago, and they want to develop their single dealer platform business because they see that the market is getting electronic in the region. Part of the ACI network, we work a lot with countries in Africa, where same thing. In Africa, there is a lot of demand to electronify the market. So you have all those. Region now have a natural demand for electronification, and they will not jump only to multi-dealer platform. They will also need to have their client relationship and single dealer platform there. So many reasons, but it's good for that business, I think. It's to continue.
Very good to hear. Stéphane, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. We could go on for hours down any of these particular topics, but I really appreciate your time and attention now. And I just wanted to say thank you very much, and almost certainly we'll want you back for another conversation later on in the year. Thank you so much.
With pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning into Caplin Connects. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss what's next. If you'd like to learn more, head over to caplin.com and check out the team behind the show.